He didn't yap or snarl, he simply rested behind the weathered kennel gate, observing a boy who had lost faith in anything positive. Then, the boy noticed it, a brass tag on the dog's collar, faded and worn but still legible. "If you found me, someone still believes I'm important." Why would a dog nobody claimed still bear such a message? And why was this boy the only one to read it? Snow had not yet blanketed Cedar Hollow, but the air was practicing its hush. Late October skies hung heavy, gray, and still over the huddled rooftops of the mountain town, while distant pines on the hills stood like guardians awaiting winter's summons. At street level, breezes murmured through alleys and porch steps, sweeping dry leaves across pavements that had forgotten the shade of green. Cedar Hollow was the sort of place where folks noticed a curtain left closed too long or a new face at the market, especially if that face belonged to a 12-year-old boy with weary eyes and a silence too heavy for his years. Noah Bennett stood at the entrance of the Cedar Hollow Animal Shelter, his breath misting faintly with each exhale. He wore a blue cap, slightly oversized, and a forest green sweatshirt with sleeves stretched from anxious twisting. Noah was tall for his age but carried himself small, shoulders hunched, gaze lowered, shoes scuffed from dragging his feet. Since his father's accident last spring, words had slipped from his lips sparingly, like coins he was reluctant to part with. Beside him stood his mother, Clara Bennett, her hands buried in the pockets of her long wool coat. Clara, in her late 30s, was a tall, slender woman with ash-blonde hair often pulled into a practical bun. Her face carried the quiet exhaustion of someone accustomed to double shifts and too few words of gratitude. A nurse by trade and a survivor by necessity, her kindness was gentle but distant lately, like a lighthouse still glowing but farther from shore. The shelter was warmer inside than Noah had anticipated, though it carried the scent of bleach and aged fur. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the quiet between them until a voice broke through. "You folks here for the Saturday tour?" asked a woman pushing a mop across the floor. She was middle-aged, perhaps in her 50s, with a sturdy frame and a red Cedar Hollow high sweatshirt beneath her apron. Her name tag read Marlene. Her tone was matter-of-fact but not unfriendly. "We're actually here to possibly adopt," Clara replied, casting a cautious glance at Noah. "Just browsing for now." "Well," Marlene said, leaning on her mop, "don't let the odors spook you. They're mostly clean, most of 'em." As they moved past the kennels, Noah trailed a few steps behind, hands buried in his sweatshirt pocket. Dogs barked and yipped, leaping at gates or pacing restlessly. Some wagged their tails so fast they seemed to lift off the ground, but Noah's gaze slid over them as if they were part of the scenery, until he reached the end of the row. There, in Kennel 12, sat a German Shepherd unlike any he'd seen before. The dog wasn't barking or even standing, he sat perfectly still in the back corner, head slightly tilted, eyes fixed on Noah's as if they'd been expecting him. His coat was a wild mix of sable, gray, and cream, matted in uneven patches, especially around his chest and ears. One eye was a soft, clouded gray, the other a sharp amber. He looked older, perhaps 8 or 9, with scars visible on his front legs. Yet beneath the weathered fur was a quiet dignity, a grace of patience. He didn't shrink or challenge, he simply watched. Noah halted. "Uh-oh," Marlene muttered behind him, then called out, "That one's unique." Noah barely registered her words. He stepped closer to the gate, and the dog remained motionless, not even a twitch. "What's his name?" Noah asked, startling himself with the sound of his own voice. Marlene approached, her keys jingling at her waist. "Just says Dusk on the tag. No chip, no records." A ranger found him wandering near Pinecrest's base 2 months ago. No one's claimed him. No one's really tried. Noah crouched slowly, resting his forearms on his knees, mirroring the dog's calm. He's not scary. No, Marlene said, observing them both, but he stirs something in folks that spooks them more. Noah leaned closer, his eyes catching the glint of the dog's collar. It was worn, the leather frayed at the edges, but what drew his attention was the round brass tag dangling from the front. He squinted and read the engraving aloud, "If you found me, someone still believes I'm important." Marlene's voice softened. That's the only reason he hasn't been euthanized. That tag, it stopped us. Dusk blinked once. Noah felt something stir in his chest, subtle but certain, like the first melt of frost. He glanced up at his mother, who had quietly approached behind him. "Want to meet him?" she asked softly. Noah nodded. Marlene unlocked the kennel carefully. The gate creaked as it opened, but Dusk didn't rush or rise quickly. He stood with deliberate care, joints stiff, and walked toward Noah like an elder too seasoned to hurry but too proud to falter. He stopped before the boy, looked up, and waited. Noah extended his hand slowly, resting it on the matted fur between Dusk's ears. There was no flinch, no growl, only the warmth of connection. Behind them, the barking had quieted. Outside, the sky began to glow with the soft gold of late afternoon sun. Clara opened the car's passenger door as Dusk hesitated by the steps. "You're not heavy," Noah said quietly. "I've carried heavier." Dusk climbed in as if he'd done it countless times, circled once, and settled with a sigh. On the drive home, the only sounds were the low hum of tires on cold pavement and the gentle rhythm of Dusk's breathing. Noah sat beside him, one hand resting lightly on the fur at his side, as if needing to confirm this was real, as if they were both waiting to trust in something again. The house on Birch Way was silent as Noah and Dusk stepped inside, and for a moment, it felt as if even the floorboards held their breath. The air carried a faint scent of cinnamon and aged wood, a blend of freshly baked apple pie from the day before and something older, settled deep into the house's bones. Outside, the sky had darkened early, storm clouds loomed over Cedar Hollow, and a lone crow perched on the power line, still. Inside, the wind occasionally sighed against the window panes, as if seeking entry. Dusk entered first. He didn't dart through the door like dogs in cartoons or sniff frantically. He stepped in with the weight of someone who had lived in homes before, many, perhaps. He paused in the entryway, his ears twitching once, then twice, listening for sounds only he could hear. His nose tilted slightly upward, taking in the scent of the unfamiliar rooms. Noah observed the dog intently. He issued no orders, made no movements, he simply lingered in the doorway, backpack still on, waiting to see what Dusk would decide. The German Shepherd moved slowly through the living room, passing the sofa, hesitating near the fireplace, then heading toward the hallway. His claws tapped softly on the wooden floor, each step measured. Then he paused before the spare dog bed that had once been Coppa's, Noah's golden retriever, who had died 2 years prior. The bed remained untouched but dusted, a silent tribute no one dared move. Dusk circled once, then twice, before settling into it, curling into a question-mark shape and exhaling deeply, as if he'd crossed some far-off, invisible finish line. "It's yours," Noah murmured from the doorway. "You can take it." From the kitchen, Clara peered around the corner, wiping her hands on a worn dish towel. "He chose Coppa's bed," she said quietly. "Guess that's decided." Noah didn't respond. He set his backpack by the door and stepped into the living room. Dusk didn't raise his head but blinked slowly, his tail giving a single soft thump against the cushion. Noah sat cross-legged on the floor beside him, arms resting on his knees. The rest of the evening unfolded without notable incidents. Clara prepared spaghetti, Noah merely poked at it. Dusk didn't beg or whimper, simply resting by the table, his presence calm and unobtrusive. When Clara accidentally dropped a piece of garlic bread, Dusk sniffed it but left it untouched. "That's surprising," she remarked with a touch of astonishment. "Most dogs would have grabbed that like a winning ticket." "He's courteous," Noah mumbled. Later that night, as Clara washed dishes, she glanced out the kitchen window and noticed something odd. Noah was sitting in the backyard, despite the light drizzle. Dusk sat beside him, not under the porch's shelter but on the open grass, their silhouettes nearly touching. The boy and dog sat still, silent, gazing at something distant. In the morning, the house stirred slowly. The rain had ceased, but the sky remained low and cloudy, the air carrying the scent of damp pine. Noah descended the stairs to find Dusk already by the back door, waiting, not impatient, just present. Noah grabbed a piece of toast and sat beside him. "Want to go outside?" he asked. Dusk didn't wag his tail but gave a slight nod, almost human-like. They strolled down the block, slow and steady. Dusk didn't tug on the leash as most dogs his size might. He matched Noah's pace, eyes scanning the surroundings with the cautious awareness of someone who'd seen too much to hurry. At the block's end lived Mrs. Callahan, an elderly woman in her 70s with short gray hair and a back curved from years of gardening and caregiving. She always wore the same light blue cardigan, regardless of the weather, and was known for offering butterscotch candies to neighborhood children, whether they wanted them or not. She spotted Noah and Dusk from her porch and waved. "Is that your dog, dear?" she called. Noah nodded. "His name's Dusk. He looks like one of those military dogs," she said. "Sturdy, vigilant, solid build." Dusk stood motionless, observing her, ears forward but relaxed. Mrs. Callahan squinted thoughtfully. "You treat that one well," she added. "He's seen things, I can tell." They continued their walk. Moments later, they passed a group of boys around Noah's age near Cedar Hollow Elementary's playground. One, tall and lanky with messy hair and an oversized hoodie, pointed at Dusk and laughed. "What's with the mutt, Bennett? You walking a cop's reject." Noah said nothing, kept walking. Dusk didn't react either, save for a subtle tensing of his frame. Noah felt the leash tighten, not with aggression, just alertness. By the time they returned home, Noah was drenched and weighed down by a fresh layer of frustration he couldn't name. He went to his room, flopped onto his bed, and stared at the ceiling. Dusk entered shortly after and settled on the rug by the window, curling into his familiar question-mark shape. Noah rolled onto his side, watching him. "You don't care what they say, do you?" Dusk blinked once, then yawned. That night, Noah pulled out the journal he'd started when Copper died. It had been empty for over a year. He opened to a fresh page and wrote, "October 28th, Dusk doesn't bark. He doesn't obey commands. He just stays. That's enough." 2 nights later, the storm arrived, not loud or theatrical, but cold, the kind that seeped through window frames and settled into bones. Outside, the wind swept dry leaves across Cedar Hollow's sidewalks like rustling murmurs, and the early dusk pressed down on rooftops with quiet finality. Inside the Bennett home, the lights glowed dimly. Clara was working another night shift, and Noah sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, a blanket draped over his shoulders, with Dusk curled on the rug nearby. The German shepherd didn't snore, but his breathing was steady, a calm rhythm Noah had come to depend on. Dusk had grown more at ease in the house. He no longer lingered by doors or paced rooms endlessly. He stayed near Noah, especially at night, trailing him from room to room like a silent protector. He never barked or growled, but sometimes, when the wind shifted or a car passed outside, he'd lift his head, ears tilting as if listening for something far beyond the walls. Noah was flipping through his sketchbook again. Most pages held dog drawings, some from memory, others imagined. On one, Dusk stood alone beneath a tall pine tree. On another, he sat beside Noah, both gazing at something beyond the page. None of the sketches had faces, only shapes and shadows. He glanced at Dusk's collar, which he'd removed earlier while brushing the tangles from the dog's thick neck fur. The collar was worn leather, darkened by time, oil, and weather. The brass tag, dulled and oxidized, hung like a forgotten coin. Noah picked it up, running his thumb over the inscription he now knew by heart: "If you found me, someone still believes I'm important." He turned the tag over, something he hadn't done before. The back was coated in grime and tiny flecks of rust. Noah squinted under the lamplight, noticing faint scratches, as if something had once been etched but had faded long ago. His heart beat faster than the moment seemed to justify. He grabbed a soft cloth and wiped gently. Nothing. He fetched an old toothbrush from his art supplies, dipped it in warm water mixed with a bit of dish soap, and scrubbed carefully. After a few minutes, the brass gleamed more clearly, and then he saw it: 144 Oak Valley. Noah froze, staring at the address. Oak Valley was real. He'd seen the name on an old mailbox at the far end of town, where newer subdivisions gave way to older cabins and winding roads with hand-painted signs. It wasn't far, maybe a mile and a half. His pulse quickened, not from fear but from a spark of curiosity and wonder. Someone had carved this on Dusk's tag, hoping it would be found. He looked at Dusk, who had lifted his head slightly, watching him now. "You came from somewhere," Noah whispered. "Someone didn't just abandon you." Dusk blinked once, then rested his head again. The next morning, Noah wanted to go. He nearly did. He even packed a flashlight and a water bottle in his backpack. But as he stood by the front door, leash in hand, Clara walked in from the kitchen, already in her maroon scrubs. "Hey," she said, eyeing his shoes. "Before you wander off, don't forget today's visit to Maple Haven," Clara said. Noah blinked. "Oh, right. Still want to join me, or are you chickening out?" "I'll come," he muttered, slipping the tag back into his pocket. Maple Haven Senior Center sat just off Elmwood Avenue, nestled among low shrubs and tranquil benches. It carried the scent of lavender cleaner and something warm, perhaps freshly baked muffins. Clara volunteered there on weekends, checking vitals and assisting with basic care. Recently, she'd started bringing Noah along, urging him to help with activities or simply chat with residents who rarely had guests. Noah didn't mind, the place was calm, and no one mocked him. Most residents didn't expect him to speak, they just wanted someone to sit with. This time, Noah brought Dusk. The residents noticed immediately. Some grinned, others pointed, and one man in a cardigan let out a low whistle, saying, "Now, that's a fine dog." But one woman didn't smile. She sat by the window, a crocheted blanket, pale green and yellow, draped over her lap. Her skin was thin as parchment, speckled with age spots, and her silver hair was pinned into a tidy, wispy bun. Her name was Ethel Harper, a resident of Maple Haven for over 8 years. Known for her sharp tongue yet gentle nature, Ethel had once taught literature in a nearby town. Her eyes, still keen behind thick glasses, tracked Dusk from the moment he entered. She didn't call to him or reach out, but as Noah passed, she murmured just loud enough for him to hear, "I've seen those eyes before." Noah turned. "Ma'am." She didn't meet his gaze, her eyes fixed on the dog. Not exactly, but close. Like déjà vu wrapped in fur. Something about how he stays so still. Noah paused. "Do you recall where?" She gave a gentle shrug. "Could have been a year ago, could have been 10. Hard to say now, but I never forget a dog with eyes like that, like he's hearing ghosts." Later, on the drive home, Noah watched Dusk's reflection in the window. He thought about how Ethel hadn't smiled or tried to pet him but spoke with certainty that she'd seen those eyes somewhere. That night, back in his room, Noah opened his journal again. November 4th, someone else recognized Dusk. That makes 2 of us now. I need to know who he was before and what happened. I need to visit Oak Valley. He clenched the tag in his fist, feeling the metal press into his palm. The address was no longer just a spark of curiosity, it was the next step. The morning Noah resolved to go, the sky above Cedar Hollow was the hue of unwashed cotton. It was a November day where the sun never fully broke through the clouds, and the breeze carried the aroma of damp earth and pine needles. Noah stood at the front door, backpack slung over one shoulder, Dusk sitting calmly at his feet, leash clipped but slack. The tag in Noah's pocket felt heavier than metal, as if it bore the weight of something yet to be understood. "Don't go too far," Clara called from the kitchen, her voice tinged with both worry and routine. She wore her usual Sunday hoodie and jeans, hair in a loose ponytail, holding a mug of black coffee. Her eyes flicked to the dog, then to Noah. "And don't forget your phone." Noah nodded, silent. He wasn't in the mood to deceive, but he also didn't know how to explain his destination, not until he was certain. They set off quietly. Dusk walked at Noah's side, as always, steady and unhurried, tail low, head slightly bowed but vigilant. As they moved beyond the familiar streets of town, houses grew sparser, older mailboxes leaned like weary elders, and fences sagged under time's weight. After 20 minutes, pavement turned to gravel, then to packed dirt. The sign for Oak Valley Road was crooked, its paint faded to ghostly letters. Noah's heart quickened, not rapidly but steadily, like the rhythm of something inevitable. Trees thickened on both sides, their bare branches creaking. The world felt hushed here, as if they'd crossed an unseen boundary into someone else's memory. At last, they reached it, house number 144, at the end of a long, leaf-strewn driveway. It was a weathered 2-story cabin, once painted green but now faded to gray, with paint peeling in long, brittle strips. A screened-in porch wrapped around the front, and wind chimes hung from one corner, clinking faintly in the breeze. The air smelled of cedar, wood smoke, and old leaves. The place felt paused, waiting. Noah hesitated at the gate, Dusk did not. The dog stepped forward, nudged the wooden slats with his nose, and slipped through silently. His posture shifted subtly, not tense, but more alert, ears lifted, head turning slightly as if guided by instinct. Noah followed. As they reached the porch, the door creaked open. A man stood there, tall and lean, more bone than flesh. He wore an old flannel shirt tucked into worn jeans, his boots unlaced. His snow-white hair was thin but neatly combed back, deep creases lined his face, and his gray eyes, sharp despite time's wear, fixed on Dusk. His name was Henry Caldwell, and he looked like a man who had once carried the world on his shoulders and then set it down somewhere, forgetting where. He stepped forward, lightly gripping the porch post, his gaze locked on Dusk. He froze. Dusk stood still, tail low, ears slightly raised, then slowly advanced, one step at a time, each movement heavy with memory. Henry whispered, "Soul, is that you?" Dusk stopped just before him, looked up. Henry dropped to one knee. "Soul," he said again, louder, his voice breaking. "My God, you came back." He didn't weep, but the trembling in his hands as he reached out said more than tears could. Dusk, or Soul, pressed his head gently against the man's chest. Henry wrapped both arms around the dog's neck, holding tight as if he might vanish. Noah stood frozen on the porch, unsure whether to interrupt, retreat, or simply witness. Henry looked up after a long moment, eyes red-rimmed but bright. "Did you find him at the shelter?" Noah nodded, pulling the brass tag from his pocket and handing it over. Henry took it with careful fingers, turning it over, brushing his thumb across the engraving like it was braille. "I had this made years ago," he said, "back when my daughter, Lila, was still here." He stood slowly, gesturing to the porch chairs. "Come in, please." Noah followed him inside. The cabin smelled of aged cedar, dried flowers, and a faint citrus scent, lemon oil, perhaps. The furniture was simple but well-maintained. On the fireplace mantel stood a framed photo of a girl in her 20s, with long chestnut hair and warm, laughing eyes, her arm around a young German shepherd puppy. "That's Lila," Henry said, noticing Noah's gaze, "and that was Soul, the first day she brought him home." He lowered himself into a worn armchair, wincing as his knees bent. "She had a heart condition," he said softly, "congenital. We knew it might take her young. She didn't care. She lived more in her 28 years than most do in 80. Soul was her shadow, always was. Slept at her feet, knew when she was about to faint. Once, he even woke me when she collapsed in the hallway." Henry paused, rubbing his palms together. "After she passed, I shut down. I couldn't care for him. I thought I could, but I couldn't." He kept looking for her every night, sitting by the door. "One morning, I left the gate open, and he left. I didn't chase him. I didn't have the heart." He reached into a drawer beside the chair and pulled out a yellowed envelope. Inside was a folded photo, Lila sitting on the porch steps, Soul curled in her lap, and a note in slanted, feminine handwriting. Henry handed them to Noah. "I wrote this for whoever might find him, but I never had the courage to take it to the shelter. The tag had to speak for us both." The note ended with, "If he ever finds someone new, tell him he still matters." Noah folded the note carefully, his eyes stinging, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Dusk rested curled at Henry's feet, mirroring the pose from the old photo. They lingered like that for some time. As the sky darkened and the breeze grew stronger, Noah stood, hoisting his backpack over his shoulder. "I should take him home," he said. Henry nodded. "He's got a home again. I'm grateful." Noah paused. "Do you want him back?" Henry gazed at Dusk, then offered a smile, both sorrowful and proud. "He's where he belongs now. I see it in how he looks at you." As Noah and Dusk trekked back through the trees, the address on the tag no longer felt like a puzzle. It felt like the start of a tale handed from one soul to another. The week after visiting Henry passed calmly, with a warmth Noah hadn't felt in months. The kind that shows not in words but in small acts, a hand lingering on a furry head, a smile shared without reason. Noah had tucked Lila and Soul's photo into his sketchbook's front pocket, beside the folded note. He kept it private, not even showing his mother, but some nights he unfolded it in bed, rereading the final line like a whispered prayer. If he finds someone new, tell him he still matters. That line drove Noah to the library. Cedar Hollow's public library was modest, tucked between the town bakery and a barber shop with a classic red and white pole. Its brick exterior was weathered in spots, but its stained glass windows, gifted long ago by a retired teacher, caught the morning light in soft blues and golds. Inside, the air held the scent of paper and stale coffee. Here, a weekend program called Reading Friends took place, a quiet space where children read aloud to dogs to build confidence. Mrs. Kessler, the librarian who ran it, was a sturdy woman in her early 60s, with short gray curls, round glasses that often slid down her nose, and a wardrobe of shawls adorned with animal patterns. Her voice carried the gentle hush of someone who'd spent decades quieting children with just tone and patience. Noah approached her nervously the Saturday after visiting Henry. "Excuse me, do you still need dogs for the reading program?" he asked, shifting his weight. Mrs. Kessler peered over her glasses. "For reading friends?" "Always, especially calm ones." She glanced past him at Dusk, who sat quietly by the door, ears tilted forward with curiosity. "He doesn't bark," Noah said, "or move much. He just stays." Mrs. Kessler smiled. "That's perfect. What's his name?" "Dusk," Noah answered, then added after a pause, "but someone once called him Soul." The librarian didn't pry. "Would you two like to join us today?" Noah nodded. Soon, children arrived, clutching picture books and brimming with nervous energy. They ranged from 5 to 10 years old, some trailing parents, others gripping crumpled papers or stuffed toys for comfort. Dusk remained unfazed by the bustle. He chose a spot on the carpet beside a low shelf of dog-themed books and settled into his familiar quiet coil. The first few children petted him briefly, then read aloud in soft, hesitant voices. One boy stumbled through Curious George, tripping over a mischievous. A girl read half of Good Night Moon before trailing off and returning to her mother's lap. Then came Zoe, small for her age, perhaps 7, with dark curls in twin braids and thick pink glasses that magnified her eyes. She wore a puffy yellow jacket with stars stitched on the sleeves, holding her book as if it might shatter. Her mother, a tall woman with a weary but kind demeanor, guided her forward but stayed back. Zoe knelt beside Dusk, opened her book to the first page, and moved her lips silently. Dusk simply looked at her. Zoe glanced up, then back at the page. A whisper emerged, then another, her words forming slowly, cautious, like steps on thin ice. "The cat sat," she paused, her jaw trembling. She looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly but stayed quiet. Zoe turned to Dusk. He hadn't moved, not a twitch, his eyes half closed, body relaxed but present, as if offering only space and permission. Zoe took a breath. "On the mat," she finished, her voice steadier. The next sentence came easier, then the next. By the time she finished the page, Dusk had shifted slightly, resting his chin on her boot's toe. She smiled. From the room's corner, Noah felt something stir in his chest, not quite pride, but deeper, calmer, like watching a seed split open in soil. After the session, Mrs. Kessler approached, eyes moist behind her glasses. "That little girl hasn't read aloud in months," she whispered. "Whatever he's doing, keep it up." On the walk home, Noah turned to Dusk. "You're good at staying still," he said, "but it's not just doing nothing. It's like being everything someone needs." He paused, then added, "I think I'll call it the still hug." Dusk glanced at him, ears twitching, tail giving a slow thump. Later that week, Clara asked if Noah wanted to attend the next parent-student night. It was the kind of event he usually skipped, crowded, noisy, full of too many eyes and questions. This time, he agreed. That Thursday, he wore his cleanest hoodie and even combed his hair. Dusk waited by the window as Noah and Clara left, his cloudy eye catching the porch light like a waning star. The classroom buzzed with chatter, desks arranged in clusters, drawings taped to the walls. Mrs. Larson, Noah's language arts teacher, greeted them warmly. She was a woman in her early 40s, short and curvy, with auburn curls and a habit of wearing bright cardigans over graphic tees with book quotes. Tonight's reading is dreaming with open eyes. Clara chatted with her while Noah drifted to the back, where a display titled "What I've Learned This Year" showcased student work. On the wall was Noah's page, written in neat block letters, adorned with a pencil sketch of a dog. I learned that sometimes you don't need to speak to be heard, and sometimes just sitting beside someone helps more than words. When it was time for student introductions, the teacher asked if anyone wanted to share. Noah's stomach churned, but he raised his hand. He spoke slowly, without faltering. I met a dog named Dusk. He listens better than most people talk. He helped a little girl read again, and I think he helped me find my voice again too. A brief pause followed, just long enough for his words to sink in, then came soft applause, nods, and a gentle squeeze from Clara's hand on his shoulder. That night, back home, Noah sat beside Dusk on the rug and opened his journal. November 10th, Dusk helped someone today, and he helped me too. I think maybe he always has. The first frost arrived quietly, silver and delicate, lacing rooftops and coating the porch steps in a thin shimmer that crunched softly underfoot. Noah stood by the back window that morning, cradling a warm mug of cocoa, watching Dusk tread slowly through the yard toward the old maple tree. Dusk's movements had grown gentler recently, not slower yet, but more intentional, as if he bore an unseen weight alongside him. The maple tree had always stood there, older than the fence encircling the backyard, older even than Noah's memories of the house. It was a tree that cradled seasons in its branches, fiery red and gold in autumn, a stark outline in winter. Now, with most leaves fallen and only brittle twigs stretching skyward, it stood like a monument, a place for remembrance. Dusk had taken to lying beneath it in the afternoons, his body curled near its roots, and Noah had begun joining him. He brought a blanket some days, a sketchbook on others, or sometimes nothing at all. They would sit as the breeze rustled the branches and birds darted through the wilted grass. It wasn't silence, it was something deeper, a mutual understanding without words. One afternoon, Noah stood, gazed up at the maple, then walked inside with purpose. In his room, he cleared a space on the wall above his desk. Using thumbtacks and twine, he began pinning up mementos, photographs, printed emails, notes jotted on library scraps. There was a picture of Zoe and Dusk, her glasses askew, her smile a crescent of triumph. Beside it hung a thank-you card from Mrs. Kessler, signed with loopy handwriting and 3 red ink paw prints. There was a note from Henry, mailed a week after their visit, with a photo of Lila as a child embracing a younger soul in front of that same maple tree. Dusk's eyes were unchanged even then. Noah labeled the display with a hand-drawn sign, "The Wall of Dusk." Each item represented someone Dusk had touched, people who had wept near him, smiled because of him, found their voice or peace in his presence. Noah stepped back, staring at it, his heart full in a way words couldn't capture. That weekend, a local reporter visited. Her name was Amelia Holt, A woman in her late 30s with shoulder-length brown hair and a light blue peacoat that stood out against Cedar Hollow's muted streets. She arrived with a canvas messenger bag, a small notebook, and a camera slung around her neck. Her eyes were sharp, curious, but kind, like someone who'd spent years noticing what others overlooked. "Mrs. Kessler told me," she said, shaking Noah's hand outside the library, "about a quiet boy and an even quieter dog who've changed how this town listens." Noah smiled nervously, Dusk sitting like a statue at his feet. "I'd like to write about him," Amelia continued, "about what he does, what he represents." Noah nodded, and over the next hour, they talked. Amelia asked about the shelter, the tag, the reading program, and even the visit to Henry. Noah shared what he could, though he held back some details. Some things belonged just to a boy, a tree, and a dog who didn't bark. A week later, the article appeared in the Cedar Hollow Herald under the headline, "The Dog Who Listens: How One Silent Companion is Transforming Lives in a Small Town." It featured a photo of Dusk beside Zoe and Noah at the library, the girl mid-sentence, her hand resting on Dusk's back. Mrs. Kessler had the photo printed, framed, and hung by the front desk with a brass plate reading, "To those who hear without sound." When Noah saw it, he felt another shift, like a pond rippling from a fallen leaf. He said nothing, but that night, he went home and crafted something new. From a fallen maple branch, he carved a small piece of wood. Using his old compass tip, he etched a word slowly, deliberately, until each groove was deep and precise. He sanded the edges and threaded twine through the top, creating a simple, lightweight keychain worn at the edges. It read, "Dusk doesn't bark. He listens, and that's louder." Noah attached it to his backpack, near the zipper, a small weight always close. That night, as stars flickered slowly above Cedar Hollow, Noah sat with Dusk beneath the maple. The moon cast a gentle blue glow across the frost-tipped grass. Noah leaned back on his hands, the air cold against his palms, and whispered, "You still matter to everyone." Dusk edged closer, one paw resting lightly on Noah's boot. No bark, no sound, just presence, just peace. It began with a murmur in the breeze. Cedar Hollow awoke beneath a quiet hush, the world softened by a veil of fresh snow. Rooftops wore delicate white crowns, and trees stood like frozen dancers, their branches dusted with powder. The season's first snow wasn't a storm, it was a lullaby, and the town listened. Noah watched the flakes drift from his bedroom window, his breath misting the glass in slow exhales. On the wall beside him, the wall of Dusk had grown, more photos, more drawings, more scribbled quotes. Below it hung the wooden keychain, its words etched deeply, "Dusk doesn't bark. He listens, and that's louder." From the hallway, Clara called, "You've got an email." Noah padded barefoot to the kitchen, Dusk trailing with soft steps. The laptop sat open on the counter, and Clara, still in her flannel robe and striped wool socks, pointed to the screen. The email's subject read, "Therapy Animal Recognition Ceremony, Cedar Hollow Community Hall." Noah's eyes widened as he skimmed the message. The town was hosting an evening to honor therapy animals and their handlers, dogs, cats, even a miniature horse that visited pediatric clinics. Dusk had been nominated by Mrs. Kessler and several parents from the library program. "They want us to speak," Noah said quietly. Clara raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to if you're not up for it." Noah didn't respond immediately. He glanced at Dusk, settled beside the counter, his tail brushing the tile lightly. Then he nodded. "I do." The ceremony was scheduled for the following Friday evening at Cedar Hollow Community Hall, a red brick building that once served as a train station in the 1920s. Now it hosted community events, local elections, and the annual winter fair. For the ceremony, rows of folding chairs would fill the grand room beneath strings of soft white lights. A small stage stood with a wooden podium and a banner overhead reading, "To those who comfort." That morning, Noah brushed Dusk's coat, letting the old dog rest across his lap as he worked through the tangles behind his ears. Dusk's cloudy eye had grown milkier lately, his movements slower, but his presence remained powerful, grounded, steadfast. "You don't have to do anything," Noah whispered, adjusting the collar. "Just sit by me, like always." That evening, Cedar Hollow felt like a snow globe, light flurries drifting through streetlights, footprints patterning the sidewalks in soft indentations. Noah wore a navy sweater and dark jeans, his sneakers damp with melted snow. Dusk walked beside him, calm and focused, each step steady. Inside the community hall, people mingled over cider and cookies. Handlers wore pressed uniforms, children clutched certificates, and dogs sported vests and ribbons. When Noah and Dusk entered, conversations hushed. One boy whispered, "That's the dog from the library." A woman placed a hand over her heart. Noah's palms grew cold. They were ushered to the front row. The ceremony began with short speeches from town officials, volunteers, and a retired veterinarian. One by one, animals were introduced, each with a brief story and warm applause. Some wagged, some barked, one cat yawned in the spotlight. Then the host, a tall woman in a gray suit named Ellen Vance, stepped to the microphone. "Our final recognition tonight," she said, "isn't for tricks or agility. It's for stillness, for presence, for a dog who says nothing yet speaks to everyone." She looked at Noah. Noah Bennett and Dusk. A hush settled over the room. Noah stood slowly, his legs trembling slightly, and walked to the podium with Dusk at his side. He adjusted the microphone, took a breath, and began. "He was rejected by the world," Noah said, his voice soft but steady, "but he still believed someone would find him. And someone did." He glanced at Dusk, who sat like stone beside him, no tail wag, no movement, just stillness. "I used to be afraid to speak," Noah continued, "but Dusk showed me you don't have to talk loudly to say something. Sometimes, just being there is louder." He paused. "When I didn't know how to help people, I watched him. He helped them without doing anything, just by listening." The hall fell completely silent, the kind of silence that holds reverence. Then someone clapped, followed by others, the sound swelling, echoing off the high beams like rising waves. Noah looked at Dusk, who blinked once, as if to say, "I'm right here." Afterward, people approached in small clusters. Children crouched to stroke Dusk's fur, elderly men extended handshakes, and one woman from the nursing home whispered, "He sat with my husband the day he passed, unmoving for an hour. I'll always remember." Among the crowd, Noah spotted a man lingering near the back, tall, lean, in a flannel coat, his gray beard catching the light. It was Henry. He didn't approach or speak, but when Noah returned to their table by the exit, a small cream envelope sat among the gifts. In handwriting Noah recognized from Lila's letter, it read, "Thank you for letting Soul shine again." Noah slipped it into his coat pocket, pressing it briefly to his chest before letting it rest. Later that night, after the hall emptied and the lights dimmed, Noah and Dusk walked home through gentle snowfall. Flakes settled softly on Dusk's back, gathering like whispered secrets. Under the maple tree, Noah paused. "You did well," he said. Dusk leaned against his leg one final time. The snow had long melted, but the earth still held a memory of cold. Spring crept into Cedar Hollow slowly that year, with tentative birdsong and delicate sprouts pushing through frost-hardened soil. The maple tree in the Bennetts' backyard stood bare but hopeful, its branches yearning for blossoms. Noah sat on the porch steps, chin resting on his knees, dusk curled beside him as always, eyes half closed, tail flicking occasionally with thought. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the sky a soft gray like fresh parchment. Noah had left the door ajar, and Clara's humming drifted from the kitchen. A gentle, weightless peace hung in the air, as if the world had briefly paused its hurry. When Noah stood, dusk didn't follow at first. It seemed like a typical pause, another of dusk's slow mornings. But when Noah turned, called softly, and knelt beside him, the stillness spoke differently. Dusk's body was warm, his face serene, curled as if he'd slipped into a deeper rest. But the steady, deep breath was gone. Noah reached out, fingers trembling, and placed his hand gently on the dog's side. There was no rise, no fall. He didn't weep right away, he sat there, hands still, head bowed. The breeze rustled through the maple branches, scattering last year's leaves across the yard. Nearby, a mourning dove cooed softly. Clara stepped outside moments later and didn't need to ask. She knelt beside Noah, wrapping her arms around his shoulders, her forehead gently touching his temple. They stayed silent. Later that day, Henry arrived in his familiar worn flannel coat, walking slowly but purposefully. The grief in his eyes wasn't raw, it was seasoned, as if he'd faced loss before. This time, he came to share it. Together, they chose a spot beneath the maple tree. The ground was soft from the thaw, and Henry brought an old spade from his truck. Noah dug most of it himself, each scoop steady, deliberate, like turning pages in a book he wasn't ready to close. Dusk was wrapped in the blue blanket that once lay on Noah's reading chair. Clara had washed it that morning, though she didn't explain why. When the earth was returned, Henry handed Noah a smooth, pale stone, already etched with 2 lines, "If you found me, someone still believes I matter, and now so do they." The words glimmered faintly in the morning light. People began arriving soon after. Zoe came first, clutching her favorite book. Her pigtails were longer now, her reading more confident, though her voice still held that gentle care. She knelt by the grave and read aloud, her fingers brushing the stone lightly as she turned each page. She didn't cry, she just read. Behind her, Mrs. Kessler stood, eyes red-rimmed, holding a tissue in one hand and a framed copy of Dusk's library photo in the other. She didn't speak, just nodded and smiled when Noah met her gaze. Henry's friend, Walt, an older man from Maple Haven, shuffled over next, leaning on a cane. He offered a new watercolor painting of Dusk beneath the maple, light glinting on his coat, eyes turned toward an unseen child. Walt pressed it into Noah's hand. "Thank you," he whispered. The last to arrive was a quiet man in a navy jacket, carrying a small camera bag and a worn copy of the Cedar Hollow Herald. He didn't introduce himself, just stood with the others, head bowed, listening as the afternoon faded. The gathering dwindled, some left flowers, others letters, a few simply touched the stone, letting silence speak what words couldn't. That night, Noah sat in his room, the space feeling both full and empty. The wall of Dusk now held a new addition, a wooden frame with Dusk's original brass tag, its inscription glowing softly under lamplight, because one dog knew he mattered, now others believe they do too. On his desk sat a stack of bound papers, his journal, printed and stapled by Mrs. Kessler, who insisted it should be shared. She titled it "The Dog Who Stayed Still" and placed copies in a basket near the library's children's section. They vanished faster than expected. Time didn't rush after that, it moved as it always had, slowly, quietly, in seasons and sighs. Noah still visited the maple tree, still read aloud some days, but the porch felt different, the silence shifted. Until chance. He wasn't planned. Clara found him in the adoption corner of the veterinary clinic, small, brown, with comically long ears, a crooked tail, and eyes too big for his face. Noah had raised an eyebrow. "He looks like a loaf of bread," he'd said. But chance trailed him everywhere from day one, not with Dusk's quiet steps but with bounces and stumbles, tail wagging like it was spring-loaded. One afternoon, Noah brought Chance to the library. He didn't sit still, licked too much, and sneezed on a bookmark, but the children adored him. Zoe laughed aloud when he knocked over a book stack chasing a squeaky toy. Mrs. Kessler shook her head but smiled. Noah watched it unfold, the same warmth, the same moment when someone felt seen. That evening, he opened his journal to a fresh page. April 3rd, Chance doesn't sit still, but maybe, just maybe, he listens too. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or lightning. Sometimes they come on 4 silent paws, with a quiet gaze and a heart that listens. Dusk wasn't just a dog, he was a reminder from God that even when the world turns away, love waits patiently, under a maple tree, in a child's heart, or in the courage to speak again. Dusk's gift wasn't in his actions, it was in who he was. And maybe that's the message: you don't need to be loud to be heard, or perfect to matter. Even when life leaves scars, God sees you as worthy, just as someone saw a Dusk. So, if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need a quiet reminder today. Leave a comment below to tell us where you're watching from or share your own story of healing. Subscribe for more real-life miracles and stories of unspoken love. And if you believe, as we do, that God sends signs in the smallest moments, type Amen in the comments. May He bless your journey.